Chapter 411. In the end, Chris completed the procedures for Chloe to get discharged. He also made a meal at home. Chloe was extremely weak as she sat in the wheelchair. She kept calling Marina over the phone. She still missed Marina despite everything. To not upset Chloe, Chris didn't tell her the truth. She had done everything a mother should do. He didn't want Chloe to leave with regrets. Don't mind her. She has always been a stubborn girl, so maybe she'll come home in a few days. You're right. Chloe only assumed that Marina hated her as always. So, she didn't insist much on it. At the table, Chloe kept telling Ethan to treat Marina well in the future. She told him not to hurt Marina, and that Marina was a good woman. Suppressing his coldness, Ethan promised to do what she said. Even though Marina wasn't present at the meal, Chloe was happy. She even drank some alcohol, and her face was flushed. She asked Olivia to watch the sunset with her. She was very talkative. Liv, if I knew that I would end up like this, I would have treasured the time I spent with you. When your dad wakes up someday, please tell him I'm sorry. I've wronged him. Okay, I truly hope that you can be happy. Can you stop blaming Marina for snatching Ethan away? After all, things have already turned out like this. There's nothing we can change anymore. Don't worry, I won't fight with her for a man like that. Since I've already given up on him, I won't look back. Chloe looked at Olivia for a long while. Then, she reached out and embraced Olivia. You're a good child, but this world was unfair. The ones who got hurt were mostly the good ones. The next morning, Chris took Chloe to a mountaintop to watch the sunrise. Leaning in his embrace, Chloe watched the golden rays on one end of the sky. She sighed in amazement. It's so pretty. I wish I could watch sunrises with you forever. Hugging her, Chris suppressed his tears. As long as you like it, I can keep you company forever. Darling, meeting you was the happiest thing in my life. It's a pity that I can't be with you for the rest of your life. Olivia and Ethan stood a distance away, looking at the two embracing figures. Chloe's face was especially calm and beautiful at that moment. They both knew that she was temporarily regaining her health for one last time. When the sun rose to its apex, Chloe's hand dropped out of Chris' palm. Chris behaved as if he didn't feel anything. He hugged Chloe quietly with a gentle smile on his lips. Lowering his head, he gazed at the woman in his arms, whose eyes were tightly closed. He planted a gentle kiss between her eyebrows. There was not a hint of sadness in his eyes. In a soft voice that no one else could hear, he said, "Honey, I've told you this before. No matter where you go, I'll always be with you." Sensing something was wrong, Olivia rushed over to him. She caught sight of the blood trickling out of a corner of Chris' lips. "Mr. Carlton, what did you do? Hurry, call 911. Ethan's gaze was dark. "It's too late." Looking at the two, Chris said, "Olivia, your mother is very timid. She must be so scared to be alone. I have to go with her. When we die, can you please bury us next to each other?" Olivia knelt beside the two, tears running down her face. "Okay, Ethan, I leave Marina in your hands. The Carltons will have to depend on you too." "I understand. Then I have no more regrets. Don't cry, Olivia. I'm going to see your mom now. Take care." With that, he closed his eyes peacefully. Then, he dropped to the ground with Chloe, basked in the warm morning light. Chapter 412. Marina was distressed to hear that both her parents had died overnight. However, because of her body, she couldn't even attend the funeral. The entirety of Aldenvine seemed to be enveloped in gray fog. When Otto learned that both his son and daughter-in-law had died, he was so shocked that he had to be hospitalized. Hence, Chris' funeral was held in a hurry. Under the gray sky, Olivia spotted a woman in black clothes. The woman was holding an umbrella as she stood in front of Chris' grave for a long time. There was a terrifying expression on her pretty face. She didn't expect that Chris would choose to die with Chloe in the end. She had been scheming for so many years, but in the end, it was all in vain. She didn't get the desperate plea she expected from Chris. He had chosen to die and express his feelings in this manner. In the end, Helen didn't get what she wanted. Olivia walked up to her. "Is this the ending you wished for?" Turning around, Helen glanced at her. It's you. She was slightly surprised. She didn't expect Olivia to be here. I've been here for a long time, waiting for you. Mr. Carlton asked me to give you this letter. Helen reached out to take it, but Olivia didn't give it to her. Instead, Olivia continued, back then, you were the one who swapped Marina out. You should know who my biological parents are, right? Helen narrowed her eyes. Are you threatening me? No, this is just a trade. Tell me about my parents' whereabouts, and I'll give you this letter. Would you like to spend your whole life not knowing how Mr. Carlton felt about you? Helen gave Olivia a dark look. Then, she lowered her voice and said, I'll never tell you about your origins. But here's a friendly reminder. If you want to stay alive, stay put in Aldenvine. If not, you'll be dead before you know it. With that, she turned around and left. She didn't ask for the letter. Olivia ran after her. Don't you want the letter anymore? Helen said coldly. I can't afford to pay the price. What price would you pay to tell me the truth? Anyway, you should mind your own business. Keep being a daughter of the Fordham family. If not, you won't be able to bear the consequences. With that, Helen left without even looking back. Olivia stuffed the letter into Helen's hand. Helen was stunned for a moment. Then, she nodded at Olivia before disappearing along the silent mountain path. Holding an umbrella, Olivia gazed at Chloe's grave. Then, she placed some flowers in front of it. Don't worry, Mom. I'll live my life to the fullest. Olivia could see that the circumstances were quite complicated in her original family. It was full of danger as well. Just then, her phone rang. Olivia picked up the call, which was from the hospital. Hello, Miss Fordham. The results of the kidney compatibility test you did at the hospital are out. Olivia rubbed between her eyebrows. Too many things had happened lately, so she almost forgot about this. How is it? Congratulations, Miss Fordham. The results are very successful. Olivia was stunned for a moment. Then, she finally registered what was going on. A look of elation appeared on her face. Thank you. Please help me keep it a secret for now. She immediately called Avery to tell him about the good news. Meanwhile, Avery was already on the way to the airport when he received Olivia's call. Mr. Avery, I have good news for you. Our kidney compatibility test is a success. Where are you right now? Avery was dumbfounded for a moment. His voice was trembling as well. What did you just say? Mr. Avery, can I use my kidney to make a deal with you? Chapter 413. Under the pouring rain, Olivia stood in front of the grave for a long time. Her body was quite soaked by now. Unable to ignore it any longer, Ethan spoke up. Let's go back. It's getting late. Olivia stood there silently, looking like she would disappear at any moment. Once again, she lost a family member. She looked even lonelier now, and Ethan's heart ached even more for her. Reaching out his arms, he wanted to hold her in his embrace. But Olivia looked calmly at him from under the black umbrella. Her gaze was so cold that it startled him. Don't be sad, Liv. You still have me. But she was sad exactly because she had him. When the mountain breeze blew past, Olivia's lone figure looked even more determined. Without another word, Olivia walked away. She had nothing to lose now. Ethan felt uneasy when he noticed Olivia's silence. He convinced himself that he needed more time to eventually heal the hurt in Olivia's heart. Seeing that Olivia had returned to her room once they were back home, Ethan finally sighed in relief. Then, he went to the study. Brent reported honestly, we found something about Miss Miller. Back then, she was kidnapped and sold to the remote mountains in the south as a child bride. A child bride. Ethan spat the syllables from his mouth. Yes, the mountain village was small and poor. The villagers were ignorant back then. Miss Miller didn't have a good childhood. I heard that she didn't have much freedom to move, and the food she ate was terrible as well. She even had to farm at a young age. She would be punished severely if she did something wrong. Ethan's veins surfaced on the back of his hand. Leia was very young when she was kidnapped. She was the esteemed young lady in the Miller family. Ethan couldn't accept the fact that she was treated like that. Is that family still alive? They died. They were burned to death in a huge fire many years ago. Miss Miller probably escaped because of that fire. Leia's tragic childhood was summarized in those sentences. It was only then that Ethan realized how she got those scars on her body. Perhaps she would never recover from the inhumane treatment. That was why she vented her anger on Olivia. "What are you planning to do, Mr. Miller?" Ethan crossed his fingers, placing his chin on the back of his hands. "I want to save her. Save her. I want to rescue her from the darkness. I want her to live like a normal person." Brent frowned. "But how are you going to tell Mrs. Miller about this?" A dark look appeared in Ethan's eyes. "I have my ways. They're both the most important women in my life, and they shouldn't be trying to kill each other. I'll love them with everything I have." He had taken a drug from the laboratory. It was a drug Toxic Hive had been researching, and it was capable of erasing memories. If he gave the drug to Olivia, causing her to forget everything, she would no longer remember the root of her pain. It would be the same for Leia. She would still be his sister, and she would never have been harmed. Unbeknownst to him, Olivia had overheard all this outside the door. She knew then that this was the decision he had made. He wanted the best of both worlds. Olivia sneered. She didn't understand how Ethan would believe that she would still play along with his plans. Not after everything she had gone through. Her expression didn't reveal any of her thoughts as she played with Connor. Ethan was busy with Toxic Hive, so he rarely went home. Other than her decreasing appetite, there weren't any problems with Olivia. Hence, the people who watched over Olivia let down their guard. But one day, Olivia received a call. "Mr. Avery." "Olivia, I've made the arrangements." "Thank you, Mr. Avery." With great ease, Olivia got into the car Avery arranged for her. There was already someone in the car, who was none other than Colin. It was the man she hadn't met in a long while. Chapter 414. Colin knew that Olivia already knew about his identity. Hence, he seemed a little guilty as he looked at her. "Olivia, long time no see, Colin." Olivia greeted, easing the awkwardness. Lowering his head, Colin fiddled with his fingers. He looked down at his fingertips like a child who had done something wrong. "As you already know, I'm Leo." "Yes, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hide it from you. I should have realized that earlier. When I was kidnapped, someone called the kidnappers. That someone was you, right? That was how you could find me so easily, and you did everything you could to take me away." Colin knew that he had kept everything a secret, and he was no better than the people who hurt her. "Olivia, it's my fault. I won't complain even if you blame me or hate me. But I never once wanted to harm you. I know, if he wanted to kill her, she wouldn't still be alive today." But Olivia had experienced so much of being lied to and betrayed. She was no longer willing to trust anyone. She didn't expect the little brother she loved to be plotting against her too. "Don't worry, everything is fine on Mr. Fordham's side. I'll be operating on him with my visit this time. I'll make sure that he wakes up without any problems." "Thank you." Colin looked at Olivia, who had distanced herself. He parted his lips, but in the end, he didn't say another word. To him, this hurt even more than getting killed. He would rather Olivia beat him up and reprimand him instead of this. "I'm sorry, Olivia." Olivia looked up at the guilty Colin. Then, she said coldly, "If you truly are sorry, you should tell me about Leia." Colin whipped his head up to look at her. He seemed to be surprised that she knew about it. "You don't have to be so shocked. I knew about it a long time ago. If you truly still treat me as your friend, for the sake of our childhood friendship, please tell me." Colin sighed. "All right, then I won't hide it from you anymore." Colin told her about the Leia he knew. "Olivia, do you remember what I once told you? Some people were born evil. Leia is one such person. She's sick in the heart." "Sick?" Colin replied, "Yes. When she was young, she was kidnapped and sold to a poor mountain village. The family who bought her treated her cruelly. Her living conditions were harsh, and she had to do a lot of heavy work. She was covered in injuries. Later on, she set the house on fire, escaping after they were all burned to death. But back then, she was also disfigured because of the fire." At that, Colin smiled mockingly. "She's a cruel person. She didn't even mind hurting herself. After getting disfigured, she didn't dare to return to the Miller family. Then, she somehow joined Toxic Hive. For the past few years, she's been working hard in the field of skin grafting so that she could see Ethan as soon as possible. After all her hard work and suffering, she was finally prepared to return to the Miller family. But then, when she realized that Ethan had you, she couldn't accept what she saw. By her logic, she was suffering somewhere out there, but her brother was busy pampering you. You were the one who stole the love she was supposed to get. Truth be told, she's just out of her mind. She wants to destroy everything wonderful, including your purest love. She planned everything, and in the end, she forced you into the abyss. She wanted to get comfort by torturing you. So, she became even crueler as she devised plot after plot to harm you. Olivia's fingers curled up. She was willing to hurt so many innocent lives just to harm me. She was bullied by her mother from a young age, so there's something wrong with her mental state. After living under such conditions later on, why would she care about other people's lives? Lastly, Colin summed it up in a sentence. Anyway, Olivia, she's a very contradictory and cold woman. Be careful if you see her. Chapter 415. Olivia planned to leave the island with Colin to save Jeff. She had something important to do before leaving. The car stopped by the beach, and Colin asked with confusion, Olivia, what are you doing? Nothing. Just ending things with someone, Olivia said as she closed the door. Colin felt uneasy as he watched her leave with determination. Olivia changed a lot after their reunion. She was uncharacteristically calm. Colin wondered if she was going to look for Leia. He couldn't allow her to do that. Leia was a lunatic. Olivia wouldn't be able to face her. Olivia, please don't do anything stupid. Colin tapped on the car window, but he didn't call out for Olivia to come back. Olivia knew that it was her only chance to kill Leia. After that, she would leave Aldenvine for good. She didn't plan to associate herself with Ethan any longer, even if she died from cancer or suffered any other consequences. Meanwhile, Ethan had just finished an important meeting. He massaged his brows tiredly and asked, "What time is it?" "It's almost 5 p.m. Do you want to go home for dinner today, Mr. Miller?" Home. Ethan would feel immense guilt when he thought about Olivia. He didn't know how he would face her. No need. A call from Kelvin came in. Ethan picked up and asked, "What's the matter?" "Mrs. Miller went to the mall today, then she went missing." "Do you think she'll try to escape again, Mr. Miller?" Ethan thought it was unlikely that Olivia would escape. She had nowhere else to go. Get some people to look for her. She wouldn't leave the city now. Olivia had no one else to rely on. She wanted to stay in Aldenvine and uncover the truth. Ethan was sure she would stay. "Yes, Mr. Miller." Ethan was about to set out to look for Olivia, but another call from a bodyguard came in. "Miss Miller has left the manor. Follow her. I'll be there soon." Ethan had been looking for a chance to get closer to Leia, and this was it. He contacted Kelvin and said, "Look for Liv carefully. Keep her from danger." "Understood, Mr. Miller." Leia was wearing a white, long-sleeved dress. The sleeves covered the scars on her arms. She looked stunning as she walked down the beach. She was surprised that Mr. Y asked to meet her. He was the man who brought her out of darkness and offered her salvation. Her heart would flutter whenever she thought about him, and she would feel nervous. When the waiter served her appetizer and lemonade, she instinctively looked at her surroundings. She didn't see any signs of Mr. Y. Leia didn't give it much thought. He was probably held up by work. She kept downing the lemonade to alleviate the anxiety she felt. The scenery was beautiful. There were boats sailing in the ocean and seagulls flying in the air. Mr. Y had sought her out last time. She figured that he must have encountered some difficulties. As Leia was in thought, someone approached her. "I've kept you waiting." "Not at all. You." Leia's expression paled when she saw who was talking. "How could it be you?" It was Olivia who came. Leia had been the hunter for so long while Olivia was the prey. It was the first time that Olivia was in control of the situation. Olivia wore black, form-fitting clothes and had an icy expression on her face. She looked at Leia and said coldly, "Miss Miller, I've been waiting so long to meet you." Chapter 416. Leia didn't think Olivia could discover her identity and even get Mr. Y to arrange this meeting. Leia's expression contorted as she said, "What's your relationship with Mr. Y?" The rage on Leia's face was evident. It was like Olivia had taken someone important from her. Olivia could guess that Leia had feelings for Avery. Smiling, she said, "Take a guess." The vague answer caused Leia's jealousy to flare up. "I knew you're a promiscuous bitch. You're not good enough for my brother. Since you're here, I might as well end you now." Leia was about to stand up and attack Olivia, but a sudden wave of dizziness came over her. She slumped back into her seat. "You spiked my drink." Olivia slowly walked toward Leia, saying, "It's what I learned from you, Miss Miller. I think it's time for us to settle the score." Olivia ordered the bodyguard to take Leia away. She had been waiting for this moment for too long. She felt like a fish out of water when her life was being manipulated. She tried her best to break free of the net ensnaring her, and she finally caught the person who caused all her suffering. The sun was setting, and the cool ocean breeze was blowing. Leia was hung over the ocean. She was shivering slightly, her body was frail, and she couldn't stand the slightest punishment. Olivia stood beside her, holding a dagger. She would periodically run the blade on Leia's skin. Olivia felt no pity as Leia's blood was flowing. There was only indifference. "Miss Miller, I might have to thank you for turning me into this cold-blooded monster. I won't feel bad no matter how much I torture you." Pain flashed in Leia's eyes, but she didn't make a sound. Instead, she said with a smile, "Is that so? I really should have injected you with the poison that night." Leia was no stranger to being tortured. She was mentally twisted. Olivia cut her again. "This is payback for Jody. And this is for Belle." She cut Leia repeatedly. Olivia had once pictured herself with a scalpel at the operating table. But she never thought she would ever cut someone to torture them. Olivia couldn't bring herself to stop. She hated Leia with every fiber of her being. There was no way she could forgive Leia. She looked at the blood staining Leia's white dress. The blood made her look weirdly alluring. Olivia felt no joy, only crushing pain. "You're the cause of all my suffering, Leia Miller. Enjoy this pain while you can. Soon, your blood will attract sharks. All I need to do then is cut you loose, and you'll be their food. I didn't expect you to have such a cruel side." Leia could barely breathe from the pain, but she was still smiling. "Cruel, you're the one that made me this way. I didn't want to become so horrendous." Olivia bellowed. She had no choice. She would rather take revenge on Leia with extreme methods than wallow in hatred every living moment. Jeff would only be safe if Leia died. The people she harmed would only be able to rest in peace if she was gone. "I don't have long to live anyway. I don't mind dying a sinner. But before that, I have to kill you. Can you see them? The sharks are here." Olivia pointed at the sharks that were gathering below them. "They were there for the blood. You deserve to die," Olivia said with a crazed expression. "What are you doing, Liv?" Suddenly, an icy voice rang out. Chapter 417. The icy voice brought Olivia back to her senses like a bucket of cold water. She looked toward Ethan with Leia's blood on her face. Ethan had never seen Olivia like this before. What shocked him more was that she already knew the truth. Olivia didn't evade Ethan's gaze. Smiling, she said, "You're just in time, Ethan. You already knew, Liv. Are you surprised? I was already carrying out my plan as you were thinking of ways to comfort me. I thought you were going to give me an explanation. I've caught the one responsible." Olivia looked at Ethan coldly. "Will you do it, or do I have to do it myself?" There were 5 cuts on Leia's body. Her blood was dripping down into the ocean, and she looked very frail. "Liv, please calm down. We can talk about this." "Calm down," Olivia smirked, saying, "You expect me to just calm down after all I've been through for the past 2 years. My family is in ruins because of you two. My dad is as good as dead. I almost died in her hands several times. Did you even spare me a thought? Liv, I know it's all Leia's fault. I understand that you hate her and me. I can give you my life. Can you spare her in exchange for my life? Please don't hurt her. She's the only sister I've got." Biting her lip, Olivia said, "The only sister you've got. I should never have believed you. Ethan, I'll never let you offer her. You two owe me. I'll get back what's mine 1,000-fold. Leia dies today. Kelvin, Brent, and the others arrived at the scene. Mrs. Miller, don't be rash. That's right. Let's all just sit down and talk things through. There's nothing more to talk about. She dies today. I've had enough, Ethan, Olivia said as she swung her dagger at the rope holding Leia. The sharks had already gathered below. If Leia fell into the ocean, her fate would be sealed. A gunshot sounded. Olivia felt her wrist go numb and saw blood splattering before her. The dagger fell to the floor by her foot. The gunshot resonated in her ears, and her mind was dazed. She only realized what had happened after a few seconds. She looked at the man holding the gun at her in disbelief. Ethan shot her. Olivia didn't feel much pain in her wrist. She felt like her chest was shot instead. She felt like there was a hole in her chest as the wind blew on her. Ethan ran toward Olivia. Her bodyguards saw this, and one of them grabbed her other hand. Miss Fordham, we have to go. Olivia was dumbstruck. The image of Ethan shooting her kept replaying in her head. He had made his choice between her and Leia. He picked Leia over her even though she was once his wife, bore his child, and they were once in love. None of those could compare to the bond of a blood sibling. Mrs. Miller, please don't run. Kelvin and the others chased after her. The bodyguards brought Olivia to a speedboat that was prepared in advance. No one dared to fire at the boat because Olivia was on board. One of her bodyguards pressed a towel against her gunshot wound. He looked at her apologetically and said, I'm sorry, Miss Fordham. It happened too quickly. No one expected Ethan to shoot Olivia. It was the man she once loved deeply. She started to cry as blood was streaming out of her wound. Chapter 418. Ethan looked at Leia, who was in his arms. She was heavily wounded, but she was smiling. She looked like a proud general that had won the war. Ethan, I won. Leia fainted in his arms after she said that. Ethan was panicking. He knew he had lost Olivia forever. Avery didn't expect Olivia to be hurt. Colin's eyes became bloodshot as he said, Olivia, your arm. I'll be fine, Colin. How could this be fine? You're going to be a doctor. This injury will cost you your career. Colin tended to her injury urgently while lamenting her fate. Colin became a doctor because Olivia inspired him to do so, but Olivia ended up like this. A doctor, Olivia lay on the bed and smiled weakly. Olivia did want to be a good doctor back then, but Ethan dashed her dreams and made her submit to a life as a housewife. And this time, he destroyed her hand. Her life was a mess because of him. She could still feel a piercing pain in her heart when she thought about Ethan. The pain would spread from her heart to every corner of her body. I don't want to be a doctor anymore. Never again, Olivia said slowly as she closed her eyes. Not even in her wildest dreams would she expect Ethan to be the one to stab her in the back. Avery sighed deeply when he saw the hollow expression on Olivia's face. He didn't know how to comfort her as an outsider. He wasn't related to her, but he kept having the urge to help her. Olivia was around his sister's age. Olivia's life was too miserable. Olivia, bear with it for a bit. I'll be taking out the bullet. All right. My hand will become useless, right? Olivia asked as she opened her eyes. Colin paused momentarily, then said, I'll try my best to fix it. He cursed at Ethan inwardly as he dressed the wound. Ethan wasn't able to keep Avery from leaving. He didn't have time to plan for that. Although Leia's wounds weren't fatal, she was too frail. He only realized her body was in a far worse state than he had imagined. Night had already fallen after Leia was settled down. Ethan sat on the steps and smoked one cigarette after the other. No one knew what he was thinking, but they could see his fingers shaking uncontrollably. Standing behind him, Brent said, Mr. Miller, the deed is done. That was true. It had already been done. It had been 5 hours and 3 minutes since Ethan shot at Olivia. It had been hours, yet his hand was still shaking uncontrollably. He loved her so much. She was his live. He still couldn't believe he shot her. Don't be too hard on yourself, Mr. Miller. Leia is your sister. You had no better options in the heat of the moment. Ethan exhaled a puff of smoke and smiled bitterly. I shot Liv. I actually shot her. She'll never forgive me. Mr. Miller. Miss Miller woke up. A spark of life returned to Ethan's eyes. He dusted himself off and stood up. Countless emotions surged within him when he walked to Leia's side and saw how weak she was. Leia smiled at him brightly. Ethan, thanks for coming in time to save me. Chapter 419. Olivia wasn't in a good state. She was already sick, and the gunshot wound made it worse. She developed a high fever in the night. The fever made Olivia delirious. She felt like she was floating on the sea. She muttered, "Mom, I'm so cold, please don't leave me. Baby, don't leave, bring me with you. Living is so painful. It hurts, it really hurts." Colin looked at Olivia with tears in his eyes. He felt so bitter. Olivia was only 21 years old, but she had gone through so many hardships. "Olivia, I'll take good care of you. I swear." Olivia slept for a whole day before waking up. Her arm had already been bandaged. Her wrist was wrapped in white bandages, and she couldn't see how the injury looked. She could only feel the pain when she tried to move. She realized it wasn't a dream. Ethan had shot her. "You're awake, Olivia," Colin said excitedly. Olivia opened her eyes to look at him. "Where are we, Colin?" "We're on international waters. We've left Aldenvine behind, Olivia. Don't worry, he can never find us again." A hint of innocence flashed in Colin's eyes. He didn't look like he was a manipulative person at all. "So we've left." Colin propped Olivia's back up with a pillow. "I'll get you some food. Enjoy the view in the meantime. We'll reach our destination in 2 days." "All right." After Colin left, Avery walked in. "You're awake." Olivia, who was staring into the distance, turned to look at him. "Thanks for helping me, Mr. Avery." If it wasn't for Avery, Colin and Olivia wouldn't have been able to leave Aldenvine by themselves. Avery looked at her weary appearance and felt terrible for her. "You're welcome. It's nothing much. Mr. Avery, we can do the kidney transplant as soon as we arrive at our destination. There's no rush. You're still weak. I've been living with this illness for a long time. I can wait a little bit more." Shaking her head, Olivia said, "It's my promise to you. You're an important man, and you still need to go home and tend to other business. It's best if we do the transplant as soon as possible. Only my wrist is hurt. I'm fine otherwise. It's a kidney transplant. I can live with one kidney. Just get some rest. The transplant can wait." Olivia looked at the ocean as her emotions simmered down. She had completely severed ties with Ethan, but she regained her freedom. After Colin healed her father, she would have her father with her. Fate had been cruel to her, but at least she wasn't forced to a dead end. She had come to terms with losing a hand. As long as she was alive, there was hope. Olivia didn't want to waste time thinking about Ethan anymore. All she could think of was the joy of reuniting with Jeff. Chloe had just passed, and no one cared more about the importance of family than Olivia. Olivia started to think about Jeff and wondered if he was doing well. Also, she was thinking of how to explain what happened while he was unconscious. Olivia thought it might be a good idea for Jeff to enjoy retirement on the island. Jeff loved fishing. He could pick the hobby back up on the island. At Aldenvine Hospital, Ethan stayed by Leia's side without leaving. He only relaxed after she got out of critical condition. He was ready to freshen up at home when a nurse stopped him. "Mr. Miller, this is Miss Fordham's medical report. She hasn't come to take it for a few days. Please hand it over to her if you see her." The nurse had seen Ethan and Olivia together due to Chloe's incident. She was sure they knew each other. Ethan was confused as he looked at the stack of reports. He grabbed the nurse's arm, asking, "What are these reports for?" "It's a test for kidney compatibility. Didn't you know about it, Mr. Miller?" Miss Fordham did the test with Mr. Avery. His kidney failure is in its late stages. He has to get a transplant as soon as possible. Chapter 420. Ethan's expression became stormy. He almost thought he heard wrong. "What did you say? A kidney transplant?" "That's right. Miss Fordham is planning to donate one of her kidneys to him. That's why she did so many medical examinations," the nurse said with a surprised expression. She continued, "Mr. Miller, our hospital is known for kidney transplants. It's hard to find a match, so the transplant should be done as soon. Ethan ran out of the hospital before she finished. He finally understood why a stranger like Avery would help Olivia. It was because her kidney was a match for him. Although she could still live with one kidney, it would still adversely affect her health. She was so young. Ethan didn't want her to give up a kidney just like that. Mrs. Miller isn't in Aldenvine currently, Mr. Miller. Even Avery has gone missing. We aren't able to find either of them right now. Mr. Miller, you have to rest. We'll inform you as soon as we get news of Mrs. Miller. Ethan used all the resources he had to try and locate Olivia, but it was to no avail. Neither Avery nor Olivia could be found. Ethan was unable to sleep at night. Every time he closed his eyes, he would see Olivia's shocked expression when he shot her. He felt like countless bugs were gnawing his heart. He felt nothing when Leia tried to cozy up to him. Ethan. Leia was holding a grasshopper in her hand. It was the insect that Ethan would weave out of grass and give her when they were kids. But they were no longer kids. What's wrong? Do you feel unwell? Leia looked at Ethan, who had grown frail, and said, Ethan, I know where she is. Ethan raised his head abruptly and looked at her in disbelief. What did you say? Colin left a few days ago. If my guess is correct, they've gone to an island to operate on Jeff. Leia, do you know where this island is? Yes, I do, Leia said slowly. After a few days at sea, the boat finally docked. Color returned to Olivia's face as they docked, but her hand was almost completely useless. She couldn't muster any strength with it. Her arm could only stay drooped on the side. Colin carefully helped her off the boat. The island was almost exactly how he described it. The sea and the sky were blue. There were a lot of fruits on the island. It was a tranquil place that would make people feel at peace. Slow down, Olivia. Colin was trying his best to be helpful. Olivia was walking quickly. She wanted to see Jeff as soon as possible. Jeff was her only family besides the birth parents she didn't even know. Colin, is my father okay? Don't worry, Olivia. He's being taken care of by professionals. He's doing well. Olivia was still worried. She only relaxed after she saw Jeff lying in bed. Although he hadn't regained consciousness yet, his vital signs were normal. Olivia kneeled beside the bed and said, Dad, I'm here. She didn't know if Jeff could hear her or not. Colin pulled her back to her feet. Olivia was crying profusely while saying, Thank you for not hurting him. He's the only family I have now. The sight of Olivia caused Colin heartache. He turned his head away and said, Rest assured, Olivia. I'll definitely bring him back to you.